I've arrived here through a very sort of tortuous path, and I, and Carl will be interested in this, I've had 3 careers. Annalise mentioned that for 10 years I was a medical officer in the British Royal Navy. What she didn't mention was that when I joined the Navy, I had to sign a contract that said during my tenure I would neither have children and I would never go to sea. Well, of course, as in all things in life, change occurs and life is rather unpredictable. And at the age of 26, I found myself bobbing off the coast of Kuwait with special forces at sea, at war, with 700 men, and me as the only woman. Now, I have to tell you, that's another DLD talk, my experiences at sea for a year with 700 men. But it does actually make it a really extreme pleasure for me to be able to spend a few days with hundreds of women, because I do find that very refreshing and rewarding. So as I was introduced, today and for the last couple of years, I am leading the Medical Global R&D Development Organization and the Office of the Chief Medical Officer at Merck, and that's the German Merck and its pharmaceutical company, Merck Serono. And my job and my role is to advance our pipeline of innovation so that we can hopefully, across a number of different therapeutic areas, try to use innovation in science to bring meaningful hope for patients. We have more than 2,500 people working globally in R&D, 57% of whom are women, PhDs, MDs, scientific graduates, and they work out of 4 major hubs on a global basis, 55 countries, and we supply our medicines into over 120 countries on a global basis. I have the privilege of being responsible for investing over $1.5 billion every year to try and take science, innovation in science, and to transfer and translate that into meaningful new medicines. So as I said, at Merck and at Merck Serono, we operate in a number of different therapeutic areas, and I do spend a lot of my time thinking about how to improve the lives of patients living with cancer, multiple sclerosis, rheumatoid arthritis, many diseases that impact women. But I'm here today, of course, to talk about one of our unparalleled legacies, and that is in the field of infertility. And as Carl said, with expertise dating back to the 70s. And so our efforts today at Merck Serono are to really expand our understanding of infertility. And this is really advancing at a rapid pace. As I mentioned, our products today, and we are the leading providers of medicines to address women's infertility issues, they are provided in over 105 countries on a global basis and have contributed to over 1.6 million IVF cycles over the life cycle of our portfolio. So if we just go to the next slide, I think you need to press the, can you put the Prezi in active mode? Yeah, okay. So of course, the broader landscape of infertility has evolved in tandem with the innovation in science, driven by the empowerment of women to choose their own reproductive path, by the full spectrum, seemingly, of opportunities for women to choose professional success first and children later. By new options in technology, and these approaches offer more choices and solutions to a woman who faces infertility. But I'd just like to spend some time today with a few personal perspectives and thoughts on fertility and its counterpart, and how these really have evolved over the last decades, and offer some insights for the implications for changes that we see that are truly occurring globally, for women, for society, and importantly, for future generations. And the foundation of the talk is going to focus on choice, and what I believe is the paradox of choice that has been created in the context of fertility. Because certainly the body is not the only consideration when it comes to childbirth. It's a conscious decision to choose. And we may all argue, and it's indeed true, that it's the most significant thought process a woman undertakes in her lifetime. Because, of course, from the minute your child is born, your life changes forever. The factor of choice and the woman's ability to define her own reproductive destiny has changed over the years and is a driving force in the shifting fertility landscape. So today, as we stand here in 2013, having a child has clearly evolved from a given, as it was expected 60 years ago, that all women wanted and would have a child and raise a family, to a decision. And this is clearly reflected in the data. You'll have to excuse me that unlike a number of the speakers today, I'm a bit of a research physician, nerdy geek, so I love to look at data and evidence, and I'm going to give you a little bit of data today. The key trends that have really reshaped this story tell a compelling story as to why seemingly choice for women today is also such a paradox. So as Carl mentioned, in the 1950s, during an era of set expectations around women and children, the average woman had 5 children in her lifetime. As we saw, on average, that number now has dropped on average to 2, and this is going to continue to drop if the forecast holds true to under 2 by the time we reach 2050 and beyond. And so here we get into the complexity of the evolution of women's fertility, physiology, and choice, and its impact on society. As a result of this dramatic shift in the number of children being born, many parts of the world are facing a flat population, or even a decline, as was shown. US, Brazil, Australia, and as we've seen, parts of Europe and parts of Asia. And of course, in Germany, this is an excellent example of the issue at hand. There was a recent excellent pullout in The Economist. And of course, what we saw there and what we saw this morning is that in Germany, we have the world's second oldest population after Japan, but importantly, also one of the lowest birth rates in Europe. This country is clearly facing a demographic bust. And there's a clear reason for this drop in volume. And here we come again to choice. Women are choosing until later in life to conceive. Across the world, in many developed countries, the average age at which a woman has her first child has increased by about 4 years on average. And this has happened over the last 4 decades, shifting from early 20s into mid to late 20s. In the US today, the average age of first birth went from 21 in 1970, and today it's just over 25. And in Switzerland, over the same time frame, that number went from 25 to 29. And this clearly creates 2 issues. First, the woman's window, her reproductive window of opportunity, is shorter. She has less time to have children. Also, as women age, their oocyte quality and quantity drops, known as the oocyte reserve. While both are considered optimal in a woman's 20s, they start to decline quickly in her 30s, and a marked drop occurs after 35. So just to give you a sense of the numbers, women are born with roughly 1 million eggs in her ovaries, and by the time she has her first period, that number has dropped to just over 400,000. The remaining eggs lie dormant and are, of course, activated by hormones during the monthly cycle. Over time, as a woman ages, the number of eggs that are available to be released decreases, and the remaining eggs accumulate defects, making it harder to have a child and increasing the risk of a birth defect. So, while women are having fewer children, of course, later in life, they are still generally making a decision to start a family. And we could ask ourselves, therefore, when thinking about choice, what goes into this decision to have a child for a woman, regardless of her age? Well, we can again look to the research in this area, and there was a recent large international study called Starting Families, and this was a global study. And this interestingly, but probably not surprisingly, indicates that the primary drivers for a woman in deciding to have a child are economic preconditions. Is her job secure? Has she reached a desirable level of success professionally? How will having a baby affect her career and her ambition? And secondarily, of course, a focus on the status of her relationship with her partner. Are they both ready? Is the relationship stable? And will having a child bring personal fulfillment? Of course, cultural norms play a huge role in this as to whether or not to have a child. So whilst many women are waiting until later in life to conceive, others are clearly choosing not to have a child at all. And this is a choice that is most striking across the Generation X. In this generation, which captures people born between the years of 65 and 79, again, another large piece of research that I've been involved in the last couple of years now by the Center for Work Life in New York, 43% of women choose not to have children. These are graduate women, Gen X. Among US men and women in the same study, aged 25 to 29, a third say they would only be bothered just a little or not at all if they wound up not having children. Nearly half of all women aged 30 to 44 felt similarly. And the same is true in Europe. And in the UK, the data is the same. A fifth of all women born in 1975 or later will remain childless, and a quarter of women with university degrees will not have had a child by the age of 40. While the numbers speak for themselves, of course, they are founded on clear, rational thinking, with qualitative findings indicating several reasons that this choice is becoming more and more common. Financial constraints, aversion to extreme pairing coupled with extreme jobs. There's an expected part of raising a child today, having full-time demanding jobs, and simply because the Gen Xers do not want to give up their freedom. As the economy fluctuates globally, downturns also play a significant role in the decision to remain childless. I'm sure many of you saw just recently that the US fertility rate has fallen dramatically since the nation went into recession in 2007, hitting its lowest rate ever in 2011 and staying there in 2012. According to the CDC, there were 63 births per 1,000 women aged 15 to 44 in 2012, down from 70 in 2007. So it seems to me that the decision not to have a child or to wait until later in life to conceive is increasingly becoming legitimate and acceptable across cultures. However, the latter, waiting, is not without physiological implications. Because waiting to conceive clearly creates risk. While later in life allows a woman to build her career and focuses on professional success, it really is a paradox. You flourish in one area, but you create a potential for risk in another. Think of it like reproductive roulette. You might get lucky, but you also might have serious trouble. Once the choice is made, a series of important questions arise. Will the body cooperate? Will a woman still be able to conceive? Will she have the opportunity to have as many children as she wants? Infertility is complex, and a complex issue, as complex as the decision to have a child. On average, per month, a woman who has no fertility issues, who is trying to conceive, generally has about 20% chance of success per month. After a year, in all likelihood, she'll be pregnant, and the odds for that, as you know, are above 90%. For a woman dealing with infertility, which presents itself in many ways, her chance of conceiving within a year is about 15 to 20% if untreated. And with treatment using medication or assisted reproductive technologies, her chances are greater than 80% over the course of 1 year of treatment. I think as Carl mentioned, a lot of people don't realize that ART essentially delivers to a woman the chances of a baby the same rate as women without fertility issues. So the number of women facing infertility has increased over the last decade, as choice has delayed childbirth until later into life. If we look at a select sample of 9 countries across Europe, 8 have seen an increase in the number of IVF cycles over the same time period of 1998 to 2012. Denmark, very interestingly, is experiencing the most dramatic increase, 1,600 cycles of IVF per million people to 2,500, which represents a 53% uptick. So clearly, women are making choices. Most women who seek medical support in trying to conceive are between the ages of 35 to 40. A woman's odds of success in terms of actually having a baby are directly related to her age. At age 30, she has a 50% chance of conceiving through ART. At age 40, that drops to 15, and at age 45, it's 3%. Because there are 2 problems that confound the choice to have a child for a woman who waits until later in life to conceive. 1, her body may not be on board, but also most women simply don't understand the correlation between age and fertility. Ovarian age and chronological age are not in agreement. At 40, a woman, of course, is young, but in fact, her ovaries are old. Many women think that because they continue to have a menstrual cycle, they also remain fertile, which is absolutely incorrect. Age is the most impactful variable on the paradigm of fertility. And most importantly, most women are unaware of the resources available to them to help treat these physical problems at play. Out of 100 women who are struggling to conceive, 56 will not seek medical support. And of the 44 that do, 19 will not see it through to the full process to maximize their potential of having a child. Cost, education, social stigmas, they all serve today as modern-day barriers to overcoming this issue. But arguably, understanding and awareness of infertility is inherent in the apparent lack of legitimacy among women and policymakers as a valid medical condition. The fact that more than half of women don't turn to proven methods of increasing their odds for conception is troubling, and we clearly have work to do in this area. And meanwhile, the science, of course, needs to make progress as well. IVF was first successful over 30 years ago today, and it's still the foundation of ART. Looking back on our progress, revolutionary innovation was the application of hormones to treat infertility, which at the time was a clearly disruptive idea, considering these were isolated from the urine of post-menopausal women, nuns, in fact, from Switzerland and Italy. Evolutionary innovation was exemplified in the improvement of the urinary products to recombinant ones. To be innovative today, we need to upset this status quo. We need to disrupt once again. Be inspirational as we consider new approaches in infertility that add value to a woman who has chosen to have a child, with the benefits offering significant advantages over the barriers and cost. And of course, a core element of treating infertility is remembering the human component in the condition and connecting this to breakthrough ideas. As I mentioned earlier, the success for a woman undergoing IVF is about 80% chance of successfully having a baby. But in average single cycles of 100 women, only 30% have embryo implantation. And of those, about 30% have a child. And this statistic is felt worldwide. In the US having the best rates, Europe at 15%, and Japan around 7%. The lack of efficacy relates to embryo implantation failures, 80 to 90% of the cases. And in 10 to 20% of the cases, uterus receptivity. One of the biggest problems we have in IVF is also the lack of objective technologies to identify which are the best embryos to transfer, and those that have the highest implantation potential, as well as the receptivity of the woman's uterus. So today, clearly identifying new opportunities to advance the science and technology of infertility should be a priority across healthcare. And I just want to say at this point that there has been a drain and a lack of funding in government and academic institutions of research grants in this space. And this needs to be addressed. We've come a long way. There is still a long road ahead for women to balance the paradox of careers and families. As more women choose to have a child later in life, and as more women become aware of and understand infertility and the treatments today. Breakthrough innovation is critical, but you know, this is not the whole answer. Support that is available to women across the spectrum of choice, younger women, women who face infertility as a physiological challenge, and women who delay conception until later in life. So as we look at the picture again, we now can see clearly the paradox that exists. The value of choice to women, freedom to choose, is immeasurable. But with each decision comes a consequence. To wait to have a child, to have a career first, to have fewer children. All of these clearly have implications, personally, on society, and globally. Thank you.